Welcome to the third episode of Two Heads Are Better Than One with me, Rod Grant.
And me, Cameron Wyllie.
First, I think what I want to say is it's a huge thank you to subscribers and listeners. I'm very pleased to say that we're now over 1,000 listeners, which apparently is a very good thing. I'm delighted with that, and keep those comments and emails coming in. And on that point, Cameron,
We've got a guest today, just to vary the pace from listening to Rod and I all the time. And we're very pleased to have as our guest Bruce Robertson. Bruce is the CEO of Next Level Educational, specialising in high-quality professional development for teachers and school leaders. He's also well known as the author of the Teaching Delusion trilogy and the Power Up series. Bruce has been working in education for over 20 years, and he was the head teacher up until last year of Berwickshire High School. So welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you both.
Bruce is going to be talking later on and telling us what makes a really great lesson. But first of all, we're going to deal with some feedback. And we're really pleased by the feedback we've been getting. Very positive and sometimes with some really good ideas in it. I'm going to start with a wee story concerning the induction day at the school that he was working in at that time, where two groups of P7s from two different feeder schools came in, looked at the wonders of the school that they were about to arrive, and then battered each other. And I had to say to him, actually, that's the second time I've heard that story. The deputy head of a well-known state school in Edinburgh told me exactly the same story and told me that they'd actually had to suspend 5 kids from P7 on their first day at their new school. Does that surprise you, Bruce?
If I cast my mind back to when I started as the head teacher of Berwickshire High School, which was in August 2020, the year before, the school had had a really poor inspection report, rated unsatisfactory and weak across 4 different quality indicators. I was appointed as the head teacher August 2020, and I was aware of a lot of the things that had been going on in the school. One of the things that had been going on was that students were routinely swearing at staff. This was a daily occurrence. It was happening multiple times a day across many classrooms in the school. So I was meeting with a teacher during the summer holiday ahead of me starting officially, and there was a knock on my office window, a student of the school, who was just looking to kind of engage with me. I think he was up to a bit of mischief, really. But I chatted to the boy for a few minutes, and then after that, I said to him, "Right, okay, on you go now." At which point he swore at me. I won't repeat the word that he used, but it began with a C. And I asked the teacher who this boy was. She gave me his name. I phoned his parents. I explained what had happened, and I said, "And on the basis of that, I am going to suspend your son for 24 hours. One of my red lines coming in as the new head of the school will be that no student should ever swear at any member of staff. That is an absolute red line for me. And we will use suspension." It's often referred to as exclusion in Scotland, but it's temporary. It's suspension. It was 24 hours. That really sent a strong signal around the school community. People were saying, "Have you heard about this new guy who's starting? He's excluded somebody before he's even began." And when I did start, my first day, it was during COVID, and we weren't allowed to have any more than 50 students together in one room at one time. So I had to lead the same assembly as the new head 18 times across the course of the day. And as part of my introduction, what I wanted to do was just to make clear what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. There was new leadership in the school, and one of the things that I said was swearing at a member of staff is an absolute red line. If you swear at a member of staff, then you will be excluded, by which I meant temporary suspension for 24 hours. Somebody did swear at a teacher within 24 hours, and that student was suspended, and then it stopped.
Yeah.
Because we'd done it twice, and I could count, I think, on one hand, the number of times that a student swore at a member of staff again across the next 4 years. It stopped it.
It's brilliant, and it's very easy. I mean, it's not, that is not really rocket science. It's just what should be happening in all schools as far as possible, because swearing stuff is absolutely commonplace.
And the student came back in, the student that I'm talking about, who was suspended for 24 hours, and he apologized to me. So there's something restorative in that. And I, of course I accept that, and we move on. That's how we learn. But that consequence, that sanction, it was absolutely needed.
Actually, it takes me back to episode 1, Cameron, when we talked about laying in the sand.
Yeah.
Students like it. They like to know where they stand. They like to know what they can do, what they can't do. And the vast majority of students, when they know where that line is, will not cross it.
Yeah, it takes me back to being at Murray House College of Education in about 1850, and them saying then that the surveys all showed that school pupils liked strict teachers best. And, Doug Lemmel's concept of being warm and strict, I mean, I always erred much more on the warm side than the strict side personally, but you have to have both of these things going on to succeed, definitely. But in fact, restorative justice, Rod.
Well, we got an interesting email from Chrissy talking about RP conversations. And she was, I think, discussing that they are an opportunity for things to go well. What went wrong? Who was affected? How do people involved feel now? How to get back on track? And she was arguing that these are skills that you can develop, a certain level of emotional intelligence, a bit more self-awareness, the ability to reflect, take on board criticism or vice versa. And that, I think the interesting point she made was, though, that doesn't necessarily take away the need for sanction. So I thought it was interesting, because we were being quite hard on restorative practice.
Favouring thrashing them with bundles of canes.
Well, yes, in a word.
Kidding.
Well, kidding, yeah, absolutely. I think what we were really arguing about was consequence.
Yes.
That there has to be consequence for certain actions.
So you think, Bruce, restorative practice?
A place for both. Both are needed. Again, if I think back to when I started as the head of Berwickshire High, August 2020, there wasn't really any formal system of consequence in the school. Everything was about restorative practice. So, for example, there wasn't a detention system of any kind. And that was something that we put in place. We put in place a lunchtime detention system, which had a restorative element to it, the sort of thing that you're talking about. What happened? What was my role in that? How do I think that made the other person feel? Well, that was a reflective exercise as part of the detention. But the detention, it was a sanction. It was a consequence. It was 20 minutes of the student's time being taken up at lunchtime. If it was more serious, then it was an after-school detention. If it was more serious again, then it was a Friday afternoon detention. And we had this, this escalation. And what we were trying to do was to avoid the most serious consequence of the temporary exclusion, the suspension, which we really didn't need to use too often at all, unless there was something high level, such as swearing at a member of staff, or unless the indiscipline was repeated, and you'd gone through the different stages of lunchtime and after school and Friday afternoon. There was a hierarchy to it.
In essence then, what is important about restorative practice are actually the people who are running that practice and their skill set and their ability to use it effectively or otherwise.
Yes.
And so, yes, actually, having read what Chris has said and what Bruce has said this morning, absolutely.
How did you find parents reacted to that? Because our next bit of feedback comes from somebody I will respectfully call an older gentleman. And his view was that the central problem in schools is lack of parental support. Was that your experience?
The majority of parents are supportive, but I think there are more parents today who will question a school's decision and who will ask, well, what is it that this member of staff did to provoke my child? There are more parents who will say things like that. They are a minority. The majority of parents are supportive, but I think there are more parents who will question a school's decision, and platforms such as social media give them a bit more of a voice. So it's not uncommon to hear about parents, posting negative comments about a decision that a school has taken in terms of sanctions or consequences, for example. So I think that has changed.
Mumsnet has a lot to blame for.
Oh yes, been there.
Yeah,
done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm with Bruce on this. The vast majority of parents are, typically on the school side, are supportive. But there's no question, Cameron, we look back at our school days, as you say, back in the 1800s. You would go home and you were frightened to even say that you'd been given a row or any kind of disciplinary sanction, which was usually a ruler across the knuckles.
Did you know my mother? Well, that's a really interesting point, because of course that will lead to a brief anecdote. The brief anecdote is this. My friend and I, age 12, up in the gallery of the school hall at George Heriot School in 1969, prefect came up and said, you two have been talking, come and see the headmaster. Headmaster wants to stop people from talking. Now, the headmaster those days, Dr. Dewar, absolutely brilliant educationist, but terrifying, absolutely terrifying man. So my friend burst into tears. I mean, he just burst into tears, and he wept all the way between the school hall and the staff room, where we were due to be disemboweled by Dome, as he was affectionately known, because of his very bald head. Anyway, he duly came down, he took off his gown. I remember it. He took off his gown, he took off his mortarboard, he laid it on top, and he said, so you two have been talking in assembly? And I said, yes, sir. And my friend went, and he said, if you do that again, I will thrash you, he said. And I said, yes, I'm really sorry, so it won't happen again. I mean, it did, actually, because I talked a great deal all the time. Anyway, the real thing that was in my head was I knew that my brother would have cliked on me. And as soon as I went home, I would be in really bad trouble. So I went home. I've waited for my parents to arrive home. And although I was pretty frightened of my mother, I admitted it. I said, I've got into trouble today. And she was actually not bad about it. And then brilliantly, my brother came home. I love you, Jimmy. But he first came in the door and he said, do you know what happened at school today? He got into trouble for talking assembly. And my mother went, whack, don't claim me your brother. It was brilliant. It was one of my favourite moments from childhood. Sorry, brother.
Yeah. But it's true, isn't it? You were frightened about going home and relaying the fact that you'd been in trouble, because you knew deep down you'd get into trouble again.
Yeah, did you get into trouble at school, Bruce?
Yes.
You like to admit to us what you did, Bruce?
Oh, well, wow, that's a loaded question.
Why bad was it, Bruce?
I must have filtered all these things out.
I think Bruce was probably quite a good boy. I had my moments. Yeah, good. So, and finally on feedback.
Yeah, there was a little piece about, playing devil's advocate. I think this came from Jane, who was saying, in the very nicest possible way, fuddy-duddy, independent head teachers, what do you know about local authority schools? Is it fair that you're creating this voice and talking about Scottish education as a whole with your limited experience in the local authority sector?
Perfectly fair question, Jane.
Entirely valid. Entirely valid.
What do you think about that, Bruce? You're a state school head. Should you be discussing state education with two old dinosaurs from the private sector?
We need more people talking about education in Scotland, whether that is state education or independent education, just in education in general. We need more people talking about that. We need more of a discussion about it. We need more people to be calling out what is actually going on the ground. I've listened to both of the first two episodes of your podcast and really enjoyed them. People have a choice. If they listen to it and they don't like it, they don't need to listen again. But I found your views incredibly interesting. So I think the more people can be talking about it, the better. And both of you are experienced teachers, middle leaders, senior leaders. I think your views are well worth listening to.
Thanks, Bruce. And there's the 500 quid we promised you. Now, to move on to us, and you
was I going to say something?
Robert's probably going to say something here.
Well, no, I think my wife and I both teachers. My mother-in-law is a teacher. Two nieces were teachers. My extended family, I think I counted up recently, we have 11 teachers in the family. And only myself and my wife worked in the independent sector. So, the fact of the matter is you are completely surrounded by people who have opinion, and their opinions are very much in line with what happens in education generally. We've all got something to say, something that I hope is valid, and as Bruce has just said, you don't like it, you can switch us off.
Well, and also, one point which I think is really important is we can actually say these things.
Indeed.
So we are retired. We are people from the independent sector. We've got nothing to lose by actually telling it as we see it, speaking truth to justice.
Yeah.
I think from the response we are getting, there are a lot of state school teachers who agree with a lot that we are saying about education. Some of them might feel that they can't actually admit to that, particularly people aspiring towards headship, to go up the ladder of state education, because putting your head above that parapet, it's very, very liable to be shot off professionally, if that's even a metaphor.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. I was about to use that
Hackneyed expression.
hackneyed expression. I remember, I think we've both been viewed in our time as a bit maverick in terms of our headship and our views and the fact that we are willing to speak out publicly. And I remember at the time of the second lockdown arguing very strongly in a Facebook post that schools should not close.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it had 750,000 views, and the vast majority were actually from National Health Service staff and teachers, who then started communicating with me privately through the school's email address saying thank you. But not just saying thank you for speaking out, but for being brave. I think that word made me really nervous about the way today's society is heading.
Hear, hear.
That I am expressing an opinion which is somehow, because it's not the common view at the time, and it wasn't media comment, in fact there was nobody that was saying anything. But to be called brave, I just felt, no, I'm expressing an opinion. And so actually coming back to that original point about independent heads commenting on Scottish education in general, I think any person's viewpoint who has experience in education is perfectly valid.
And on that note, we're going to move to the topic for today. And I'm going to ask you, Bruce, just to start talking. I mean, Rod and I will interrupt you because that's just the nature of the thing. But start talking about what to you, as an expert in pedagogy, what makes a great lesson?
So my books, they're all about that. What you were saying about, the voices and opinions and calling things out. That's what the teaching delusion does. The teaching delusion, the subtitle of that book is why teaching in our schools isn't good enough and how we can make it better. So what I wanted to do was to be able to express some views on that. And most people would say that everything I was calling out has really resonated. But one of the things that the book gets into is what makes great teaching and what makes a great lesson. So the starting point for me would be the teacher being clear in their own mind what it is that they want students to learn in the lesson today or across the series of lessons. When I work with teachers in schools in a professional development capacity, I talk about content clarity underpinning purposeful pedagogy. So we first need to be clear in our own minds. What is it specifically that I want students to learn in this lesson today or across this series of lessons? And that underpins everything that follows. If we don't have that clarity in our own minds, what we will often see in lessons is tasks that are good for keeping students busy. They engage with them. Many might even report that they found them fun, but do they actually lead to any learning that is valuable? Well, often they don't. So first start by being clear in your own mind what it is that you want students to learn.
Does that for you include writing learning intentions on the board?
Not necessarily. It's the idea of the learning intention. It's most important for the teacher to have that clarity in their own minds. This is what I want students to learn today or across this series of lessons. If there is value in sharing that as a learning intention formally with a class, well then do it if you think that adds to the learning. Sometimes the learning intention, the purpose, the learning goal is better framed as a question. That can help to stimulate interest. And that would be a second point that I would make. What makes a great lesson? Well, the teacher takes steps to make the lesson interesting. Because much of what we're trying to teach students, it isn't naturally interesting. Some people will try to say that we need to focus on content that is useful. And often they mean a link to the world of work, for example. But I think if we start to filter the content of the curriculum through useful, then we start to lose all kinds of things that could be valuable. So it's a teacher's job to make whatever it is that they are teaching interesting to students. And in his book, Why Don't Students Like School, by Daniel Willingham, he talks about what students would say typically makes a great teacher. Now, the three things that students will typically say is the teacher's a nice person, they care about me and my learning, etc. The teacher is well organized, they know what they're talking about, and the lesson feels structured and purposeful. And the third thing students would say is that the teacher makes whatever it is that they're teaching interesting.
How much of number one and number three can go together? I mean, I suppose when I was in the classroom, I was a kind of old-fashioned, open inverted commas, charismatic teacher. That is, I didn't use very many resources. I quite often hadn't planned in very much detail what I was going to do. You know, you were just going to do chapter 4 of To Kill a Mockingbird. I think that quite a lot of the interest value comes out of your relationship with the pupils. Do you think that's right? I mean, knowing them as individuals in a classroom situation, how important is that?
Passion and relationships will get you so far, but you will probably trip yourself up if you haven't really thought, this is what I want students to learn in the lesson today. These are the tasks that I need students to engage with. Sometimes you can get by just winging it, but more often than not, I don't think that you can. The more confident you are in your subject knowledge yourself, well, that's going to help. The more experienced you are, the more likely it is that you can just pull something out of your back pocket. But almost always a lesson is going to be better for the teacher having taken some time to really plan, this is what I want students to be learning. These are the activities that should be good, helping to achieve the goal.
Were you a big planner, Rod?
What do you think?
And I think it's probably you were a bit more in the Wyllie school of...
Winging a prayer.
Yeah, I mean, I should say, I think that point about trajectory of experience, which means that I have taught chapter 4 of To Kill a Mockingbird 18 times before, and I know what the questions are that I need to ask, and I know who I need to ask them to, which is really important. I think this idea of questioning being really important.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Teaching this, that it's an art and it's a craft. I think what I always found about the curriculum, regardless of whether in the old days it's 5 to 14 or curriculum for excellence or even, teaching an English national curriculum, was that, and let me preface this, the problem that I have with curriculum for excellence is actually that it tells you what the outcomes of the experiences should be. And for me, that means that you're predetermining the learning. So I'm all for having a plan. And I know what I want children to learn, but I also want to be surprised by what children learn. Because I think too often we go into the classroom knowing that we are after a certain set of correct answers. And actually what I want to see in kids is the ability to be critically aware. And so I would often start a lesson by doing something that was completely irrelevant to the main topic. So I'd put 3 numbers up. 3, 6, 9. What's the odd one out? Or I'd show them a work of art. What's the relationship between the two people? Why is the lady holding a parasol? Why is the workman tanned and she's white? All of that kind of stuff. Because I think too often in our schools, we are set by the curriculum in such a way that we become rigid. And I always liked the idea that kids didn't necessarily know what answer you were looking for as a teacher, that it was a bit more open-ended. Bruce, have you got thoughts on that approach?
I've got lots that I'd want to say about that. Both of you have mentioned the importance of asking good questions. So that is an essential feature of a great lesson. The more we can get students to think, the more likely they are going to learn. Again, if we jump back to Daniel Willingham's book, Why Don't Students Like School? He would say that memory is the residue of thought. So students are most likely to learn specific things when they think about specific things. Now, I think, Rod, what you are describing is the application of knowledge. So I think we do need a clearly mapped out curriculum that says, regardless of the teacher who you have in this school, this is the knowledge you are going to be learning. These are the skills you are going to be developing. Now, nationally, we don't have that at the moment. Curriculum for excellence for me, and I'm on record as saying this in my books, for me, curriculum for excellence isn't a curriculum because it doesn't do the essential thing that a curriculum needs to do, which is to make clear what it is that students should be taught at school. That's the essence of the curriculum.
So would you, if you were in charge, one day you might well be in charge, but if you were in charge, would you move more towards the kind of curriculum that E.D. Hirsch talked about? I mean, the sort of idea that you just write down in a big book everything you want young people to learn. I mean, how much variation on that would you allow?
So in the Teaching Delusion 2, I talk about the curriculum as knowledge-based and skills-orientated. So we need to map out clearly what it is that we want students to learn, and then we need to create opportunities in schools for students to be able to apply that in structured and less structured ways. So we're not trying to hold anybody's learning back. Everybody has access to core content, knowledge and skills, but then how that is applied, well, that's really up for grabs. So nationally, yes, I would be prescribing core content. The extent to which it is prescribed will be different in different subjects. So in maths, for example, there's going to be a lot more commonality, you would imagine, between schools coming from a core national curriculum than in something like humanities, history. There should be more choice. But we should be able to decide nationally some of the specific things that every student should be learning about or learning to do, regardless of which school they go to and which teacher they have.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, just to come back to the humanities, because I was involved in a discussion at the weekend about the kind of books that we teach in English. What's your teaching subject?
Chemistry.
Ah, right. Interesting. That's very interesting indeed, because, I mean, the question, I would think that in chemistry, you would look to a core set of knowledge that young people know, and clearly that has to be related to practical skills, because in some respects, they can't know the knowledge without some of the practical skills and vice versa. But in English, of course, the choices are virtually endless. So, I mean, nowadays, you can do a film for higher English. You can do an episode of a television program for higher English. Not terribly sure. I don't think that constitutes dumbing down. The question is, to what extent should you, in history, say, these are the periods of history we want young people in Scotland to leave school knowing about? These are at least the kind of books from a large selection, possibly, of books that we want them to read, so that there is a sort of value in everything that they're learning.
Schools should be able to make some of their own choices themselves, but at a national level, there should be a degree of direction. So we should be asking ourselves questions such as, should every student who goes to a Scottish secondary school have the experience of Shakespeare?
Yes.
For example, we should ask that question, and then a decision should be made as to yes or no. So if we said yes, do we mean that every student should be reading that play, or do we mean that every student should be getting the experience of that play, perhaps potentially watching the play? We answer that question. Should every student be experiencing the same play? Probably what we're going to conclude is no. But it's those questions taking you down to a level of specificity, and then you decide, right, that's specific enough at a national level, and then schools have some autonomy with regard to the specifics within their own school.
So, what else makes a great lesson?
Okay, so if we come back to that, the idea of connection. So we make links back to things that students maybe already know, understand, can do, not necessarily as a result of school. Maybe these are things they know, understand, or can do just through their own day-to-day experience. But we try to find out where we're starting from, or we make links back to things that we know we have already been teaching them, maybe ourselves, earlier in the topic, in a previous year. Now, we can't make those links backwards if we don't know what the content of the curriculum is. So if we have no idea, say, in the first, second year of secondary school, what students were being taught in history and geography and science and maths, then we can't make these links back. And I would suggest that that's absolutely what's going on in most schools across Scotland today. We don't really know what the content of the curriculum is. In primary school, it's not at all clear in the early stages of secondary school. If you said to a random school, could you share the content of your curriculum with us? What they might give you are the experiences and outcomes set nationally, but as we've said, they don't really specify content.
Well, and also the distinction is that if you specify content, if you say here is our curriculum, it's perfectly reasonable. There are very easy ways of testing whether or not that's working.
Yes.
If you say our school just creates these experiences and outcomes, it's actually very difficult to say to a class of children, do you understand this experience or this outcome?
Yes.
Relative to you're supposed to have studied, Mary Queen of Scots. Tell me some things about Mary Queen of Scots that you now know about Mary Queen of Scots, and then seeing how they can apply that knowledge to other situations and other things. Mary Queen of Scots, should we have a monarch at all? It seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable leap in the primary school classroom.
Yeah, the lack of structure actually creates a lack of accountability. So there are many instances where students would join us, just as you're describing, Bruce, in S1, and their level of knowledge was really incredibly poor. There was almost nothing there. And you delve a bit deeper into what they were doing in primary 5 or primary 6, and we had kids joining us in S1 that didn't know how to divide.
Yeah.
Had never been, and it's not because they were not mathematically able. It's because they had never been taught.
That's exactly right. And it comes back to the point that content clarity underpins everything else. So we said purposeful pedagogy, but then how we assess as well. If we don't know what the content of the curriculum is, it's very, very difficult to plan for meaningful tasks in a lesson, or indeed to know what it is that we should be assessing. So what have we said to this point? Well, we've said content clarity. We've said making that content interesting. We've said being well prepared and organized. We've said doing something to find out where we're starting from, making some links back, because great teaching is responsive. We're making decisions all the time about what to do or not do, but these decisions are at their best when they're grounded in evidence about what is actually being understood and learned. So that would be the next point in terms of what makes a great lesson. We're asking lots of questions to get students to think. Thinking is the key to learning. But the other reason that we're asking the questions is to make students' thinking visible so that we can respond to it, or we're checking what they already know and understand, what they can already do, and the extent to which something is actually being understood through the course of the lesson.
And that, for me, was always the basis of what is now commonly called differentiation, that you're asking different people different kinds of things. You're knowing the level of quality of a response from a pupil who may not be so able in your subject relative to somebody who just to whom it comes naturally. You're taking that latter person and stretching them by asking things that are much more complex and much more difficult, and at the same time you're carrying the whole class along to some common purpose.
Absolutely. I wouldn't use the word differentiation. I think it carries too much baggage. I think it's too ambiguous.
Some applause. We should actually have a wee thing that when we press a button where you and I can decide that we're pressing a button when somebody else is talking, and it sounds like 10,000 people are clapping.
It's a common curriculum.
What's that?
A common curriculum for the class, common content, common knowledge, common skills. What students then do with that knowledge, with those skills, how they apply it, that should be open-ended, and we shouldn't be holding anybody's learning back. We should be, if we want to use the word differentiation at all, differentiating the support that students get in order to achieve clear learning goals, differentiating the challenge in by which we mean what students then do, the application of the knowledge and the skills.
Oh, imagine a senior educational figure saying, I don't like the word differentiation. That is just music to my ears. That I'm listening to this. And the unlikely events that anybody involved in teacher training nationwide is actually listening to this, they will have fainted at this point.
Yeah, but Bruce is spot on. I've always argued that, of course you're going to have a range of ability within a class. But when you start a new topic, then everybody should start at the same point, on the same page, and get then the same opportunity to shine. And I'm thinking about one wee lad who had really zero mathematical ability. I hate to use the word hopeless, but he just didn't get it. And he was in this tiny group of 3, basically the 4th group with their own name. And of course, they recognized it didn't matter what you called them. They knew they were the bottom group. And of course, that affects confidence. And anyway, this wee lad, I would close the door and I would do away with groups. Didn't have groups to talk to class. Every topic started. And then you differentiated actually by outcome. But you took them as far as they could on that journey. he was an absolute star when it came to doing coordinates. He just got it. In fact, he was in the top 3 in the class in terms of outcome. I would never have known that. He would never have had that experience. He would never have had that joy of success if he hadn't been allowed to do the topic because it was deemed too difficult for him.
So how do we avoid, Bruce, that issue of low expectations of individual pupils or even of whole groups of pupils? I mean, moving into the more delicate area that was characterized by the soft bigotry of low expectations. How do we avoid that?
So the point that Rod made is a really, really good point. Everybody does come to a lesson knowing, understanding, being able to do different things. But in terms of our curriculum, this is where we're starting from. We're going to take some steps to find out exactly where we're starting from. And we've got this clear, challenging learning goal for everyone. Different students will take different amounts of time to get there. And we vary the amount of support that students can get. But that is where everyone is going. We do that by breaking things down into small chunks, building on that step by step. The experience of success is the number one motivator for anyone in any walk of life. That's a key research message. So if we go back to the question, what makes a great lesson? Well, the sense of and the experience of success is a key component. We can have a challenging learning goal. If there is no experience of success, a student is going to get demotivated pretty quickly. So the role of a teacher is to break complex, challenging content down into component parts, develop mastery with each of those parts, and then later on in a learning sequence, these start to come together. And the student can suddenly do something. They understand something that they never believed they would have been able to do or to understand.
Do you think that's really interesting? Just coming back to the fact that you were a chemistry teacher, that last bit of analysis that you gave there, do you think that would be easier for a chemistry teacher than for an English teacher? It's just that it seems to me that the kind of way in which I did higher chemistry. I got an A. And my father was a chemist, so I've always been very interested in chemistry. So do you think that's probably easier in terms of breaking down bits of knowledge to restructure them and put them back together to take people onto concepts than it would be in a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe it's a holistic, probably, subject like English or like history?
No, I think the principle absolutely applies. The execution of the principle might be slightly different, but the principle absolutely applies. I think, Cameron, you're considering chemistry as being more about declarative knowledge, the facts, the concepts, the things that can be articulated verbally or in writing. There's procedural knowledge as well, knowledge of how to do things. And if it came to writing an extended piece, for example, breaking the component parts down, that can very much be done with that as well. So you know your own subject area better than me. But I think that the principle absolutely applies across all subjects.
So this has been great, Bruce. What's your final tip for young people, particularly young teachers out there? I'm just going to say this now. I actually think Bruce should really be in charge of teacher training in Scotland. I don't know who makes that decision. It will be nobody who'd listen to you and me, I think, probably, Rod. So we've probably done his chances of doing that in completely. What's your final tip, Bruce, for a great lesson?
Too much of education today, particularly in Scotland, is driven by ideology. There are too many messages about what teachers should be doing or not doing that aren't really grounded in principles that come from cognitive science, what learning is, how it happens, educational research, what's most likely to be the most effective at particular times. So my tip would be, as much as you can, start to engage with professional reading. My own books would be a nice starting point, obviously. But, I've talked about texts such as Why Don't Students Like School by Daniel Willingham or Barak Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction paper. You referred to Doug Lemoff earlier. Start to engage in some professional reading to develop your own research-informed understanding of principles that then you can draw upon, which will help you to make really good decisions about what to do or not do in the classroom.
So Rod and I very much want to thank Bruce Robertson. 2 names, very easy to spell on your Amazon search for his books, the Power Up series. And thank you very much indeed for coming, Bruce. That was absolutely great.
Pleasure.
Yeah, Bruce, thoroughly enjoyable, actually quite fascinating and food for thought. It led to a really positive conversation, Cameron.
We like positive conversations.
We do.
In this world where Scottish education's in a difficult place, it's very, very good to see the light.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this episode of Two Heads Are Better Than One. We hope you've enjoyed our journey through the world of schools and leadership, and especially today's insights from Bruce Robertson. If you've got thoughts, questions or stories of your own, we'd love to hear them. And you can reach us on rodandcameron@gmail.com. Make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if you enjoyed today's chat, leaving a quick review really helps more listeners find us. And remember, in education and in life, two heads really are better than one. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Class dismissed.